All right, back to Islam. Okay, we're going to be moving into the later Islamic period. And I apologize, folks. In the last video, I did not give you the time frames that we're looking at here. So, what we're looking at, let me get to my book, is the Islamic world is going to run from 622 CE to, well, I mean, to present day, really to 1924. Um, in the Arabian Peninsula in particular. But let's just say, for the sake of this world art history class, we're going to run it from 622 CE, okay, all the way up to 1500, which is where the map is, map 10.1. Okay, so that is going to be your time frame that we're looking at. So now we're going to move into the latter Islamic art period, and that's going to be at around 800 to 1500 CE, Common Era. Okay. And we're going to again look at architecture, and then we're going to look at what's called in this case, we're going to look at the architecture and see how it's changed, compare and contrast it to the great mosque that we saw in the early Islamic art period, and see how it's altered. And we're going to look at more tile work, and we're going to look at carpets. And the tile work and the carpets are going to be part of that luxury art. I don't know why I can't say that word luxury, because I guess I grew up with not a lot of luxury things, so it's hard for me to, or luxurious, I can say luxurious. I didn't grow up with a lot of luxurious things, so it's not as prominent in my vocabulary. All right, so we're going to begin with figure 1026 for later Islamic art. And this is the Mosque of Selim II in Turkey. And you should be able to look at figure 1026 on the exterior, and then also look at figure 107 and see a vast difference on the exterior. Okay? You should be able to point out with figure 107 that there is that number one, the Qibla wall that's very visible with the Great Mosque in figure 107, and then how that Qibla, that wall, is not prominently recognized in figure 1026 with the Mosque of Selim II, and that you have a much more ornate exterior looking at figure 1027 than figure 107. All right. Also, whenever it comes to the minarets that are incredibly different in regards to figure 1026, you have four. All right, four minarets in the four different cardinal directions that are announcing that it's time for prayer in figure 1026, the Mosque of Selim II, versus that of the figure 107, the Great Mosque. In Spain, you can see that there's only the one minaret in the very back of the mosque. The back, the front. Whenever it comes to the breakdown of 1 through 8 for the different designs of the Great Mosque, it's the 8th, which numerically would be in the back. Okay? But there's only one. All right? So be able to explain how you can see four during this later Islamic art period with the mosque versus that of just one with the Great Mosque in the early Islamic art period. Okay, so incredible ornamentation on the exterior of the mosque here in the later period than that of the earlier mosque that we saw in the previous video. Okay, and it's going to have a large dome like the central plan that we saw with Hagia Sophia. So you should be able to take figure 1026 and relate it to Hagia Sophia. And like I mentioned in the previous video with Byzantium, late Byzantine art, Middle Byzantine art with Hagia Sophia, is that it is going to be converted into a mosque ultimately. It's in Turkey as well, just like the Mosque of Selim II here. All right? And it has a very similar look to it. Okay, and the important thing is in regards to its incorporating, or Islam incorporating Hagia Sophia, are the 4 minarets that you see in Hagia Sophia in the Byzantine chapter, all right, on those videos. I believe it was Byzantine part 1, all right? So be able to go back and look at that and see how it's similar to this mosque of Selim II with the 4 minarets on the outside. Another thing in regards to this mosque that it shares with Hagia Sophia, and that came first with Hagia Sophia, is the central plan. So with Hagia Sophia, the central plan was first. The minarets were not originally there. They came in later by the influence of Islam. And in this case, the minarets were always there, and then that central plan with that very elaborate, almost mathematical looking dome that we have here at figure 1026, they derive that central plan from the Byzantine period. Okay? So with the great mosque that we saw at figure 10.7, there's the big open forecourt where the prayers are conducted. Okay? Here, it's concealed and it's covered by the dome with this central plan. And then the prayers are done inside underneath the central plan dome structure. Okay? And what we're going to do now is look at figure 1027 and see what the inner workings look like. Okay, you can see it's heavily patterned, lots of detail. You have that striped arcade again going all the way around full circle and creating this fractal series of 8 points working its way up. Okay, you can see that there's 4 main arches that are striped that go all the way around in that arcade that create a certain type of curve, that sprung arch curve, that repeats itself again in the interlacings of the mosaic work up high, in the glass work up high on the concave part of the dome. And that star, again, on the concave element of the dome, on the inside curve of the dome, is 8-pointed. So that 8-pointed pattern is finding its way all the way up to the top, all the way down to the grounds and the floor of the mosque. Okay? But do remember that here in the latter Islamic art period, these domes are going to be the central plan derived from the Byzantine period, right? And that the prayers are going to be conducted under these domes. Versus the difference with the Great Mosque back in the early Islamic period, the prayers were done in an open courtyard called the forecourt, right in front of the minaret. Okay? So the domes were originally there with the Great Mosque, but they were 2 small domes as you entered and then as you exited the nave. So there's one at the beginning of the nave and the one at the end of the nave. And then you opened up after that hypostyle series of columns, and then you entered into the forecourt for prayer. Okay, so that's a big difference, big visual difference. And another thing that this allows is sunlight, lots of sunlight. And the Middle Ages in Europe are going to derive these techniques of these different interlacing archway systems to create this glassware that you can see that allows all this heavy illumination to come in. And you're going to see this come in again in Europe, okay, in the Christian churches and the Christian cathedrals. They're going to derive this technique from Islam and use it in their cathedrals. And then the Gothic archways that we'll see in the Gothic cathedrals like Notre Dame or Chartres, all right, in France. It's going to be derived from these techniques. Okay, and then Islam is deriving the dome technique from Byzantium. Right, so they're all kind of sharing throughout history, so to speak. Some call it sharing, some call it thievery. Just depends on what you subscribe to. All right, it's still beautiful nonetheless. All of it is still very beautiful nonetheless. Let's see. I talked about the minarets and how they're in 4 different directions, the cardinal directions. We talked about the sunlight coming in through the dome structure with the windows. Again, repeated archways are being seen. And remember, no figures. We don't see any figures. We see patterns, we see geometric shapes, and then we'll see Arabic as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it whenever it comes to the Mosque of Selim II. Now, let's take a look at some luxury ware. And the first is going to be figure 1028. All right. This is a glazed mosaic tile work. It's part of one of the mosque's mihrab, and again, the mihrab is going to be that main center element with in the middle of the Quab wall. All right, and if you can see, that is a use of patterning glazed tiles. And what tile work is it's a flat piece of clay, a slab is what it's called, flat, like a graham cracker shape. Then it's glazed. Okay, after it's been fired, or it's glazed with a specific glaze on it. It's dried very quickly, and then it's fired. And then after it's fired, it's hardened, and it's called vitrification. At that point, you can crack it or you can break it to shatter it and make it look fragmented for mosaic purposes. Or you make a template pattern that is going to remain flat and not be broken at all. And you can see the differentiation in figure 1028. If you look at some of the star patterns, you can see that some of the star patterns are fragmented pieces of ceramics that are flat pieces that have been fired, then brought out, and then shattered and broken. Versus the more contained and specifically designed elements of the mihrab here is going to be found where you see the Arabic holy words placed upon this glazed mosaic series of tiles. Okay, so you're going to have this controlled border. That's going to be pieces of tile that are not going to be shattered or broken. They're going to be crisp and clean. And that's going to be within the Arabic itself, which again is a transcription of the Quran and different Arabic statements that are derivative of the Quran. And then you're going to have the border patterns that are going to break up the different sections of this part of the mosque. And then you're going to have the, again, another star pattern. And within that star pattern is going to be broken up features of those small little glazed tiles. All right, and they're going to be all grouted together to give this different type of patternization. All right. You can see in figure 1029 more larger, elaborate uses of mosaic tile work. And again, mosaic is just combining individual pieces, compositing them together, and getting them interlocked with some kind of adhesive or mortar to keep them fastened. All right, and to keep them held. And these are not going to wear down over time. Sunlight is not going to wear out the color of these glazed tiles. Whenever something is glazed, it's like putting a glass sheet on it, a glass veneer that prevents it from fading over time, or even in some cases scratching. Only diamond can really scratch some glazes. All right. So they can withstand the test of time as well, as long as the structure is held, like in this case in 1029, the minaret structure, as long as it withstands its structural integrity, that tile work isn't going anywhere. No winds are going to blow it off, none of that stuff. It's not going to get abrased or broken down. So this is an example of tile work on the minarets itself. So again, it is a luxury kind of ornamentation on the surface of the mosque, right? And that's something that's going to be very big in the late Islamic world, is that not just the standard substructure of the minaret or the mosque, but figure 1028 and figure 1029 show us how the use of the ceramic mosaic tile work is going to start to give a new, wonderful, colorful skin to the surface of these mosques. Okay. So now let's look at some carpets. We have figure 1031, carpet from the funerary mosque, and here it's made out of wool and silk. And whenever I'm showing you the luxury art of the carpets, you should be able to look at these carpets and see how they reflect the tile work that are on the exterior of the mosque, and then also the patterns that you see on the inside of the mosques. Okay, so when you look at the carpet in figure 1031, you should be able to go back in the PowerPoint and look at the Mosque of Salim II and all of those different 8-pointed patterns geometrically inside of that dome and see how that's reflected in the carpets. So whenever these carpets are laid out, wherever they're doing their prayer, they should be thinking about the mosque. All right? Because that's the place of communal prayer. So by laying out these carpets that reflect the patterns and the symbols, and in some cases even Arabic on the carpets, it should make the worshiper of Islam think about being present in the mosque, even if he or she can't, or he can't. All right? So if they're working and they're in the middle of business and they can't make it to the mosque, when they lay out their carpet and they're ready for prayer, or if it's in the evening or whatever the case might be, when they roll out these carpets, they should think about the tile work on the exterior of the mosque, which is going to be very stylistic of the later Islamic art period, as well as these ornate patterns and designs on the interior of the domes of the late Islamic mosques. All right. So what I'm saying is look at figure 1031 and be able to relate it to figures 1029 and 1028 in regards to the mosaic tile work and what those patterns look like, and also figure 1027, the inner view of the dome of the Mosque of Salim II. And you should see a connection between the luxuary work of the carpets in figure 1031 and that of the luxury work of the tile work in the minarets and the minaret of figure 1029, and also the mihrab of figure 1028. And then the effulgent radiance of the pattern in the center of the carpet should remind you of the inner dome, of that central plan of the Mosque of Salim II. So that's what I want you to be able to do. I want you to be able to look at the carpet, relate it to the tile work, and relate it to the inner patterns, the geometric patterns found on the inside of the latter Islamic mosques. Okay? Let's see if I got anything else for you. That's pretty much it. I'll leave you with those two videos with Islam. Again, remember, all this information that I'm giving you could easily be a whole semester's worth of work. All right? So what's in the PowerPoint, you're not going to have to know everything, because what's in this PowerPoint really could be like 8 to 9 weeks worth of class lecture, because it's just so vast. And we're looking at almost 1,350 years of brilliant development in Islamic art. And that would take much longer than just 1 week. So anyway, I'll leave you at that, and we'll get to the next chapter here really soon. We'll be jumping into chapter 11. All right.